Welcome to Talking WoW, the podcast where we talk about World of Warcraft, believe it or not. My name is Tom. This episode is going to be about Darkheart, which was the new patch in World of Warcraft. It's the patch before the pre-patch, Marty. We're getting towards the end of an expansion here, and I have just name-dropped my co-host there, Marty. Looking good there with your new hairstyle.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to talk about all the dark stuff, I suppose.
Yeah, your hair is very not matching the theme of
something had
the
to
episode
even
here.
Something had to.
Yeah,
even
there's got to be a balance, hasn't there? That's what we've been told. So yes, here we are setting up the scene for the War Within, and I suppose where do we start with this, Marty? Because if you've listened to Talking WoW quite a lot, and when it gets to the point where we're talking about the story, Marty, I know something that you've wanted for maybe forever is a story that starts setting itself up, that starts building on a foundation, that starts, start somewhere small and starts building up. Do you think we are getting this with Darkheart and then, moving into the War Within?
I hope so, because sure, I would, as you said, one of my big wishes is that it's not just, that the story actually continues into the next expansion, and it's not just necessarily, one expansion concludes. Obviously, one expansion needs to conclude something, but doesn't need to conclude, everything. And that's pretty much how it, more or less has been up until now. I think the closest that we've gotten is probably from Pandaria into BFA. But the only thing that I really feel like that I'm missing here a little bit is probably a little bit of a larger connection to all the events that happened in Dragonflight. I know there is a little bit of a connection, but it's not super clear. There's this one character, the Harbinger.
I want to stop you right there before we move forward, because you get into this patch and suddenly everyone's talking about the Harbinger, and you're like, well, sorry, who the fuck is the Harbinger to start with? Like, who is this? And obviously, a couple of quests later, you find out it's Xal'atath, which that's good, because for a small second, I was worried, Marty, that it was another jailer type thing. It was like, oh, who's the jailer? Who's the Harbinger? Let's have this mystery all around it. But thankfully, no, that's not the path we're going. They resolve that fairly quickly.
Yeah. I just wish that the connection to whatever happened in that timey-blimey dungeon, because that's basically what's setting all this up. At least, that's the expectations, because we don't know for sure if that's connected, but we think that is connected because good old Iridicon goes through a void portal. And
it definitely is connected. And something I did like was when you started these quests, and part of me was like, Darkheart, is that thing from Dawn of the Infinites that you were saying? I'm like, yeah, it was, wasn't it? And you spoke to Khadgar, I think, and there was an option to just replay that cinematic.
Oh, was there? Sorry, I must have missed that completely then.
No, that's fine, Marty. You're old, you miss stuff. That's totally fine. And I was like, oh yes, so okay, that's where the Darkheart was from. So I clicked that and rewatched that cinematic, and I thought, that's good. That's good to put some previous context in place. Like you say, I don't think it's maybe quite enough, because you also have them talking about this Radiant song, don't you? Which it's like, okay,
what is it?
That sounds interesting. Yeah, what is it? Has your character heard the Radiant song, Marty? Because apparently, according to Khadgar and Jaina, everyone's heard it.
I think it's because I always listen to my own music, so I'm probably been listening to Linkin Park or something like that, so that's
my
so
you just totally
song.
missed it. Yeah, Marty's going to be like, when the expansion launches, where's everyone gone? He's still in Valdrakken, and he's got his headphones on, listening to some rock music, and he's like, I didn't hear no Radiant song, I didn't get told where to go.
That sounds, I think that would totally be in line with my character, yeah.
So it's interesting because they really could have made that connection a little bit better, I think, after the defeat of Farak, perhaps, during that post-quest cutscene where not cutscene, but those post quests where you're going around the new world tree, you're serving some drinks. Remember that? You're serving some food to guests. Perhaps they could have just had like a little cutscene in between that where suddenly, everyone's having a party, everyone's having a good time, and suddenly this noise, this sound appears and everyone's like, whoa, what is that? They could have had something like that to just bridge that connection a little bit, because this radiant song thing feels a bit, well, no one knows what it is, and apparently everyone's heard it.
I just want to really, really quickly mention that that party we were at, where we were as the champions of Azeroth, actually were servers at that party. I'm like, what? How does this work?
I know. Talk about down to earth with a bump, isn't it? But then people have been saying, we don't want to be the hero anymore. We just want to be part of the story, and serve some canopies and drinks. That's your new calling, champion.
We have been demoted.
So yeah, we're jumping in here and we're trying to find out who the Harbinger is, which is Xal'atath. And I think this questline is important though, because honestly, Mari, there's a lot of talk on social media and a lot of people getting very excited about Xal'atath. And to be honest, I didn't really know who Xal'atath was. I know they appeared in Legion. We freed them from an old relic or something like that.
Not just any old relic, Tom. This was
any old relic.
This was the legendary weapon. Well, not legendary. The artifact weapon from Shadow Priests. And if you played a Shadow Priest and had that artifact weapon, then it will be whispering the things to you, just like some old gods sometimes do. And then I think there was a few story beats where we freed them later on as well. Xal'atath is pretty well known to some.
Yeah, the Shadow Priests have it. Shadow Priests are very excited about Xal'atath, and everyone else is just a bit like, who? Who? But this is important. This is important to have this quest to at least introduce that to everyone else, because not everyone has a Shadow Priest, Marty, believe it or not. And also, I believe Xal'atath had something to do with the defeat of N'Zoth in BFA as well. Is that, this is a character that's had some small threads in the past, and that's weaving into the future now. And I'm going to drop a little...
And I think this is the issue right here with WoW storytelling sometimes, that these things that weave in also weaves out for a whole expansion or 2 or 3, and then they come back, and and it would just be a little bit nicer sometimes if it didn't weave in and out all the time, that we actually had these expansions weave more together. So the next expansion, there were these threads that were hinted at in the previous one. Now we continue with those ones, and then in the next one again, we continue that thread instead of having to just jump back and forth and have to remember what happened 3 expansions ago and things like that. And that's what, when you asked me the question at the beginning of the episode, that's what I wanted a bit more, that it actually makes sense and is a little bit more fresh in memory when we switch from one expansion to the next expansion.
Yeah, and I think they've never really been good at doing that, have they? But I'm willing to give them the bye ball here, because they are setting up this trilogy now, this Worldsoul Saga. So I'm like, this is what I'm expecting in the Worldsoul Saga. They're setting up the foundation here. This is only just a very minor quest line, really. It's very short, but it introduces some characters who are probably going to be focal to the start of this story. Khadgar, Illyria, Jaina's off somewhere doing something. They mention Magni as well. Where's he? Yeah, so they're bringing back some they're bringing back some classics here. Something I wanted to drop on you here, Marty, because I don't know if you've seen it, but there's some theories going around, some a bit outlandish theories that Xal'atath is actually working multiple timelines here. And I'm not just talking about in World of Warcraft retail. I'm talking about Xal'atath is potentially working timelines in Season of Discovery and Cataclysm Classic, and maybe even WoW Remix, the running of the pandas, where there's some theory that Xal'atath is actually trying to collect essences or powers from old gods in different timelines We know she did it. She collected some power from N'Zoth, and there's just some theories that she's showing up in different parts of World of Warcraft versions right now. There's something in Season of Discovery with a shadowy figure, and it could be that Xal'atath is targeting old gods, that old god power from the past, that, you know, from different timelines. What would you say to something like this? Because it feels very like Marvel Studios or something.
You know what? I like a good universe theory. It's so cool. I mean, one of my favorite authors is Stephen King. And when you read through a lot of his books, you all of a sudden realize that there's a lot of interconnection between all of them. And, you know, something that happened in book number 1 is like mentioned in a newspaper article in book number 3. And, you know, I love this kind of stuff. So if this is true, I think that is cool. That is amazing. Obviously this is not for everyone, because not everyone is playing all versions, but it's still cool if you can keep it at a level where you haven't had to see, you know, the 3 previous Avengers movies to understand what's going on in the next one, you know, because that can also be, you know, the danger when you do things like that. But if it's just small Easter eggs like that, I'm fine with it, and I think it's immensely cool.
Yeah, I think if, you know, 10 years ago you were telling me like, oh, well, did we even have WoW Classic 10 years ago? We didn't have these tools to even do anything like this. But recently, with the fact that Blizzard are trying new things, you know, we've seen WoW Remix coming out and Plunderstorm, and I don't know, it just feels like maybe a different direction with the story. They're trying new things in that regard. So if they did try something like that, I think it would be very interesting. I don't know if it's going to happen though, because then it feels like if you were, you know, playing retail, you might feel like, oh, I have to go play Cataclysm Classic to find out how Xal'atath extracts this power from this timeline or something like that. But at the same time, it could just be a, you know, a very small nod, like you say, just, you know, a couple of lines of text or something, and then you see the full impact of that in retail, you know, with a cinematic or something like that. And something I really do hope we see more of is cinematics, because they are really great ways to just enforce the narrative and enforce those connections as well. And I think early on here, we've, you know, with regards to the War Within, we're already seeing slightly more tender moments between characters. Like there's a great cutscene just with Illyria and Khadgar, and Khadgar's just being a bit of a, you know, a bumbling uncle, really. And he's like, oh, you know, he's just like making reference to the Void. He's like, you know, you're still our Lyrian, you're still good with or without the Void. And then he's like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't have said that. And I don't know, just those little tender moments of just seeing the characters not always acting so heroic and stoic is just, I think that's refreshing. To you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I just hope that, you know, that they're not overdoing it, because sure, those tender moments and those, you know, it's quotation marks say normal moments between characters should totally exist, and they have already, you know, done that with the huge cinematic, and they're doing it in here, and I just hope that they're not overdoing it. That is because it still needs to feel natural. So we have seen in the past a few examples where Blizzard have been going down one kind of road, and then they've been overdoing it, and that's not, you know, the good way to do it either. So again, as we said earlier, it needs to be a balance. So if it's balanced out and it feels like it fits into the story, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, these heroes and champions of Azeroth are also just at the end of the day normal people.
That is what we thought about the Darkheart storyline so far. But what about you out there, champion? I'm sure you have some thoughts and feelings of where this story is heading. Are Blizzard finally getting it right? Why don't you let us know in the places that you can do that? We're on YouTube. You can leave us a comment. We're on social media, on Twitter @TalkingWow. We'd love to hear from you. I've been Tom.
I've been Marty.
And we've been Talking WoW.
Thanks for tuning in, champion. Did you enjoy this episode of Talking WoW? If so, why not drop a review on your podcast catcher of choice, or leave us a comment? you can find Talking WoW on Twitter or YouTube over at Talking WoW. Hope to see you again soon!